All right, we mentioned this. I remember talking about this just before we got off break. We were looking at what's coming up next, and we were looking at these things, and it's called matrices. Matrices is actually a plural. Matrices is plural, but it's plural for the word matrix. X, there you go. So what in the world is a matrix? Well, I'll just give you the definition. It's kind of short, so I'll write it down. It says a rectangular, sounds like geometry, doesn't it? A rectangular array of numbers, or a set, a grouping of numbers. But that's the word that they use in here. All right, so that's basically a matrix. So on a matrix, we use a capital letter to represent a matrix. We use capital M. All right, so this would be a capital M. And we use these little brackets like this. Okay, all it does is contain the matrix. It doesn't mean anything, really. All it does is just group the matrix together, okay? But we use brackets. And so I'm just going to give you ones they give in the book, 2, 4, 6, 3, 7, 5. There's no commas in between, okay? But they're separated, right? This 2 is separate from the 4, separate from the 6, and so on, okay? And there are a couple things you know about the matrices. Let's do this in a different color. You have rows and columns, all right? So these two right there, so see that grouping right there and that grouping right there? What do you think they are? Do you think they're rows or columns? They're rows, right? So that's a row and that's a row, right? And you got columns. Which way do you think the columns go? Up and down. So how many columns do you think you have here? You got 3. There's one column, there's a second, there's a third column. All right, so this, I'll just put a C for column. Is that all right? So that's a column, and that's a column, just because I don't have much room up there. Okay? Let's go back to this. We would call this the first row. So the top one is the first row. And then as you go down, it would be the second, the third, the fourth if you had 3 or 4 rows. Left to right are your columns. So that would be column 1, column 2, column 3. Okay? So this has, what? 2 rows. And it has what? 3 columns. All right? And so this is how we, what would be the word? These are the dimensions. Let's write that. Dimensions. Because they're going to ask you that sometimes, so you need to see that word. So if they ask you for the dimensions of a matrix, you do the dimensions rows by columns. You've seen that X before, meaning by, right? 2 by 3, 3 by 4, right? So that's what it means. It doesn't really mean multiply. It just means rows and columns, all right? So in this one right here, you got 2 rows and 3 columns. We would call this a 2 by 3 matrix. Okay? So this is a 2 by 3. So 2 rows, right? And what? 3 columns. Make sense? All right. Yeah, we just got to get all this stuff down first before we actually start doing anything. And really today, we're not really going to do a whole lot with them, okay? The next lesson, we're going to add them. The next lesson, we're going to multiply them and do a bunch of other things with the matrices. Today's lesson is just understanding what the matrix is, what are the names of it, what are the rows, the columns, and all that kind of stuff. All right, just trying to get all that stuff out of the way. You could write this like this. Since this is matrix M, I could put a capital M and then put a 2 by 3 down like that. So a lot of times you'll see it like that. This is matrix M, and it's a 2 by 3 matrix. Now, the 2 by 3, it doesn't tell you what numbers are in it, does it? It just says that there's 2 rows and 3 columns. Now, that becomes very important, especially when we do multiplication of matrices. Okay, knowing the rows and columns really comes into play when we do that kind of stuff. We're not going to do that for a couple lessons yet. All right? Let's see. All right, so we're ready for an example. Everybody got that down? I'm going to push it up here. All right, let's do an example. Example 1. And it says state the dimensions of each matrix. So I'm going to give you 3 matrices. And you just have to, again, we're not doing anything with the numbers. These numbers could be anything at all. I'm just looking for the stuff that's inside here. By the way, almost forgot this. The numbers that are inside here are called the elements of the matrix. Okay, you might see that written down somewhere. Okay, the elements. Yep. So all these numbers are elements, all right? The numbers that are inside the matrix. So again, that's another word you might see, so I thought I'd throw that in there. So there's matrix A. Here's matrix B. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and L. All right? Again, it doesn't matter what's in here, and it doesn't have to be numbers inside the matrix, okay? The things that are inside the matrix, okay, they're the elements. So you could have letters in there. You could have a bunch of different things in there, but normally we would have numbers. In this case, there's letters, right? C, matrix C. This one is 1492, so 1492. All right, and then matrix D is X, Y, and Z. All right. So what we have to do is we have to just tell me the dimensions of these matrices. Okay, remember, we do it by rows and columns. R times C. All right. So how many rows does matrix A have? Again, these are your rows right here. Okay, so it's going to be 2. How many columns do we have? These are my columns. We have 2, so it's a what? It's a 2 by 2 matrix, okay? You can just write 2 by 2. If you wanted, you could put a capital A and then put a little 2 by 2 underneath of it like that. Simple as that. We good with that? All right, what about this one? Rows and columns. How many rows? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a 4 by what? 3. Again, you could write B and then 4 by 3. Doesn't matter. What about this one? It's a little bit weirder. How many rows? Just 1 row. How many columns? 4. Okay, it's a 1 by 4. Okay. What about this one? How many rows? 3. How many columns? 1. So it's a 3 by 1. That's all they're asking you. Now again, I know you guys saw that there's quite a few more problems on this homework, and a lot of it is just this. You don't even have to write down these matrices, okay? All you got to do is look at it and write 2 by 2. You know what I mean? They're not all like that, but a lot of them are. So it should be pretty quick. It's not like you got to do a whole lot of work for any of these problems at all. So that's nice, isn't it? Okay. This right here, let's go different color. Let's go this color. Since you have 1 row, I don't think they refer to this very often, but they do put this in the book, so I figured I'd put this in here. Since there's only 1 row, we call this a row matrix. So this one, okay, matrix C, is considered to be a row matrix. All right. Let's see, D, what do you think D would be called? If this is a row matrix, this would be a column matrix. Good. All right, so we'll call that a column matrix. All right, and let's see what else we got. A. Now, there is something special about A. See, it's 2 by 2. It's the same number of rows and columns. So what do you think it kind of looks like? A square, right. So we call this a square matrix. Not really, no. It's just different ways to name them. Just be a little bit more specific, I guess. That's the only thing about that. If it is a square matrix, it's 2 by 2, so they're both 2s. So we would call this a second order matrix as well. Okay, you only do that with a square matrix. You can't really call this like a 4th order or a 3rd order because they're different rows and columns, okay? But if you have the same rows and columns, you could call it, in this case, a second order matrix. All right, if it's 3 by 3, then obviously what would it be? It'd be a third order matrix. All right. Sometimes they also throw these things in. You probably won't see it a whole lot, but when they explain, they'll have an explanation of like how to multiply and how to do some other things. There's a thing called a determinant. There's other things you can do. Find the inverse. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with these matrices, and sometimes you'll see it written like this. So I'm going to do a 3 by 3. They're all going to be A's, but we're going to have a subscript. And, all right, so here's a matrix. This is our first row and our first column. So I'm going to put a 1 and a 1. That doesn't really mean 11. Okay, it just means first row, first column. Everybody got that? What do you think you're going to call this one then? A what? 1, 2, because it's the first row, second column. Again, we always go rows, then columns. All right? I always remember this. I usually tell this story. Nobody cares anymore. But if you go to the grocery store, there's a lot of colas you can get. My favorite is Pepsi. But back in the day when I was a kid, we used to get RC colas. Anybody see RC cola? It used to be our favorite. We'd actually go to the gas station, because I remember before, this is how old I am, I remember before they sold 2-liter sodas. And when they did first start selling 2-liter sodas, they were in a glass bottle. Okay, they were 2 liters, just like it is now, but they were in glass bottles. And so I remember before they even had that. So we'd have like a 12 ounce, 20 ounce, maybe 16 ounce. I don't know what it was. But RC colas, we go to the gas station and they sell them. They'd have these wooden containers and all the bottles would be in the wooden slots, and you would take it, right? You pay for it, okay? And then you go home after you drink them, you put the bottles back in, and you go back and you get money off the next thing. So they give you money back for those glass bottles. So anyway, that's my RC story. So I forget what it was. I was a kid and my dad did the paying, and so I forget what it was. But I remember for years, I think the last time we ever got bottles from the gas station, we never gave the bottles back. And so for years, we had them in the corner. I had like a couple cases, not cases, but a couple of those wooden, crates, I guess, where you put the bottles in, and they were just collecting dust. I think my dad eventually just threw them away. But that's my RC story. So how do you remember rows, columns? Remember what? RC. Okay, that's how you can remember it. All right, enough of that. What's this going to be? What's this A going to be right here? 1, what? 3. And then what's this one going to be? 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3. And this? 3, 1. Good. 3, 2, and 3, 3. All right, so a lot of times you'll see it like this. You'll see them written as subscripts. These little subscripts, I'll write that word down, subscripts. Did I spell it right? Subscripts. S-P-R, no, I didn't spell it. R-I-P-T-S. Supposed to be an R in there. Oh, that's awful. Okay, I'm not going to write it down. You write it down. Subscripts. All right, so that's what these are right there. Okay, again, it's not a 21. It's not 2 times 1. It just tells you where it's located. That's that. All right, so with that said, we got a little example. And again, this is part of your homework. I mean, this is as easy as the homework is. You just look at it and tell what position, okay, that it's in. Or they'll give you a position. You tell what number's in that position. So here's a matrix. So it's 3, 17. I could just put any numbers in here at all. It really doesn't make, I guess it would make a difference. This is example 2. I'll write that down as soon as I finish writing this. That's 12, 7, 31, 6, and then 11, 29, and 4, 8. Okay, there's a big old matrix. What kind of matrix is this? What's the dimensions? It's a 4th order, right? Or a 4 by 4, right? So, 11, yes. All right, so here's 4 questions. This kind of stuff's going to be on your homework, and this is, again, why I felt okay giving you as many problems as I did, because it's super easy. So they're asking you, find the number, find the value from this matrix of this position right here. All right, so I'm going to write all four of them. That's a 2, 3. This is a 4, 4. And this is 3, 1. All right, so what number is associated? What value, what element in here is associated with those positions right there? 1, 1. Where's 1, 1? 3. Right, so you just write down a 3. See how easy that is? You don't really have to do any math. You just got to know where it is. 2, 3. Where's that?
That is 114.
Second row, third column. Boom, right there. 14. Everybody got that? What's this one? 4, 4. Fourth row, fourth column, right there, and it's 8. And then 3, 1. Yep, 3. Third row, first column, 12. Yeah, that's true. Well, not really, because rows, because you go X, Y. X is this way, right? Y is this way. So it is kind of the same as a graph. Is that what you said, the same or opposite? Well, because you're going rows, then columns. So you're going horizontally, then you're going vertically, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a graph. Okay. And we will have one. I don't think on this lesson. Yes, we do, actually. The very last thing we do on this lesson, we are going to associate it with points on a graph. All right, I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, let's do, that was example 2, by the way. I said I was going to write it down. I never did. That was example 2. Now we're going to do example 3. And I actually took a screenshot of it because I didn't feel like trying to draw it all out. Now I got to remember where. No, that's not it. Oh, that's something different. Where did I put it? School stuff. Was it Algebra 2 book? Yep. Screenshots. There we go. Now I'm getting there. So let's put this on there. And then let's put this on there. All right. So that looks like your book, doesn't it? If you got your book open. Yep. And let's make these a little bit bigger. It was a screenshot, so it's a little, the resolution's not so great on it. But you can still read it, good enough. So I wanted to put this on here because I wanted to show you, this is a very, very simplified way to use matrices. I'll tell you what, let's push this over. But at least it gives you an idea of how you might be able to use it. So here we go. This is a Christian book that we use, all right? So that's why they put scripture memory on here, all right? So you're at summer camp and you got to do some scripture memory, and here's how many verses that your team's memorized, all right? And so that's your little chart. So you got the blue team memorized, 12 that day, right? And the red team only memorized 10. The green team did really well. They memorized, what do you think? Probably 15, and so on, okay, for those days of camp, all right? So that's your graph. What they want you to do is they want you to put that into a matrix, okay? Write a matrix that describes this. Now, this thing right here is the same exact thing, except they just put the numbers instead of looking at the graph, figuring it out. So let's use this one. That'd be a lot easier for us. Would you agree? All right, so there's your day 1, 12, 10, and 15, just like we said. If I went to day 2, 3, and 4, you're good to go. So we're not really going to do anything with it. Later on in this chapter, we're going to do some word problems. You're going to see, oh, okay, I see how they put that in a matrix. And then the matrix sometimes makes things a little easier to figure out, all right, if you want to, depending on what you want to figure out. Right now, it's just super basic. All we're trying to do is just set up a matrix from this information.
So like set up a matrix for this, 12 being 1, 1.
Yes, exactly right. Yep, it's written just the way it's written right here. You just write it as a matrix. Exactly right.
Do you need to put the subscripts every time you...
No, you don't have to put the subscripts, okay? Unless they, ask for them, but I don't think they ask for it here. Okay, so let's put it in here. So what is it? We got 12, we got 10, 15, 5, 11, 4. All I'm doing is just rewriting that chart, but we're going to just make it look like a matrix what's that, 16, 19, and 12. All right. Yep. And then we put the little brackets right there. We can name it whatever we wanted to, but always name it with a capital letter. I don't think I actually named it. All right. Yeah, and that could be a question. They might give you a chart like this, and all they do is just ask you to write it as a matrix. And there you go. Easy as that. Pretty simple, isn't it? Yep, and that's what part of example 3 asks you to do. But they do ask you a few more things. They say translate the data from the graph into a 2x4 matrix. And 2x4? Did I just write that wrong? It's a 3x4, isn't it? Or no, it's a... What am I doing? Oh, I know what they're doing. There's a different one. This wasn't the example. This was just to show you how to change it from here to here. Okay, now I know why it's a 2x4 because of this one right here. This is the actual example that they give you in the book. All right, looks kind of the same. Now we're talking about Katie practicing her music. All right, this is how many hours she practiced. Wow, 5 hours, 6 hours in January and February. All right, so if we were to write this down, how would we write the matrix? What do we have here? This is a 5, right? What's this one? 6. And then this one would be 8. And then 7. This would be 3 and 9. And this would be 2 and 4. Okay? So how would I take that information, that data, or data, however you want to say it, how would I take that and turn it into a matrix? Well, we'd go, this first week would be one column. Okay, so this would be in my first column. So what would it look like? 5 and 6. Okay, this would be my second column. So that would be an 8 and a 7. And this would be 3 and 9. And this would be 2 and 4. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's how we're doing it there. And they say state the values of P for practice. So we'll call that matrix P. All right. So that's the first thing they want you to do. Put it into a 2x4. Is that 2x4? Yep. 2 rows, 4 columns. It's a 2x4. So the next thing they want you to do is state the values of P12 and P23. All right, so that's pretty easy. So what does that mean? Right? First row, second column would be an 8. And then 2, 3. So this one, 3 would be a 9 right there. That's all they ask you about it, okay? Again, this first lesson is super, super easy. It's just an introduction to matrices. They're not really asking you to do anything super difficult. I forget my times already. Whoops. 05. Okay. All right. Yeah, because we only got one more example to do. So it should be pretty easy. The coordinates of a point, okay? We've done a ton of that kind of stuff already this year. Did a lot in geometry. This is beginning, it's just before example 4. So the coordinates of a point. Dealing with matrices, okay? So the coordinates of a point can be represented in a matrix, and we usually use a 2 by n matrix. Where does the 2 come from? Again, if we're doing a coordinate of a point, what's the 2? That's your what? Your x and your y. The n depends on how many points that you have, okay? So rows, so your row, yes, would be 2 rows, and depending on how many points you have, n number of columns, right? If you had 5 points, it'd be a 2 by 5 matrix. If you had 3 points, it'd be a 2 by 3 matrix, okay? But you always start off with the 2 because your ordered pair is your 2. So your x and y are going to go right here, all right? So if I had x1, y1, I had x2, y2, x3, y3, and so on. You follow me? All right. So the n means how many columns, how many points are you going to have? In this case, we got 3 points, right? But here's what they give you. They give you a graph. Yeah. You'll see after I put the graph on here, I think it'll make more sense to you. So we'll do the graph first. Let me grab a graph from way. Oops, what did I just do?
JV basketball is now dismissed. Thank you.
There we go. No basketball players in here? Good. All right. Oh, did I copy that? Copy, paste. There we go. Yep. All right. I probably could have saved some time just by drawing the thing out, but just thought it'd look a little nicer if I do it this way. And we got some time, so. All right. Here's what they do. They give you some points on a coordinate graph, and you have to write it as a matrix. That's all they're asking you to do. So the one matrix is going to be all the points that are on this graph. There's actually 5 points on the graph. There's one right here. That's point A. There's one here. That's point B. Sorry, that's E. I was going out of order. That's E. Where's B? 2, 3. That's B. C is 5, 2. Right there. That's C. D is 4, -3. Right there. Okay, so this is kind of stuff they're going to ask you to do. Again, it's not, you don't really have to do any math. You just have to write it as a matrix. All right, so remember, it's a 2 by whatever. How many points do we have, right? So you're going to have 2 rows. Okay, your X is on top, your Y is on the bottom. So let's go in order from A to E, all right? So the A point, what's the point? What's the coordinate of point A? 0, 0. So I'm going to put a 0 there and a 0 there. Does that make sense? Okay, point B, where's point B? 2 what? 3. So this is going to be a 2 and a 3. Getting the idea? Yep, C is what? 5, 2. D is 4, -3. And then E is 3, 1. And that's all they ask you to do. They don't ask you to do anything with it. Nothing fancy. All right? They just want you to see that you can take coordinates on a graph and translate them and make them into a matrix. Right? And that's how you do it. Okay? So that would be 1 point, a second point, whoops, and so on. Okay? Pretty easy, isn't it? Yeah, this is your X, right? That's your X, and this is your Y. I think that's what you were asking earlier. Yeah. And these are just your number of points, okay? It's your first, this is point A, that's point B, C, D, and E. Again, we haven't learned enough about matrices today to do anything with them, all right? All we're doing is just an introduction, just to kind of get you the idea of what a matrix is, a few of the specifics about it as far as the, their elements and the dimensions of the matrix and all that kind of stuff, because you're going to have to do that later on. You're going to have to know all that. So this is just our foundational stuff. Okay, tomorrow we're actually going to add and subtract matrices from each other, okay? Really simple. It's probably just the way that you think it should be. Multiplication's not. Multiplication, it's not difficult after you get used to it, but it's not something you can just look at and say, oh, this is how I multiply them together. You probably don't do it the way that you think you would do it, okay? There kind of is division. We are. But they don't really call it division. We're going to multiply by not really the reciprocal, but the inverse. Okay, and there's a certain way to find the inverse of it. And that's a little bit complicated, just a little complicated. But again, we're just starting today. Tomorrow's super easy. And then when we start getting into multiplication, that's when you're going to have to learn some steps and really learn the process a little bit. All right, so the first couple days is going to be a piece of cake with this. All right, but then it gets a little bit tougher. But I think when you look back on it, I think you'll look back on matrices and say, yeah, I think I like matrices. They were okay. They weren't so bad.
How many sections in each chapter?
I do not know. You can look to see. Everybody good? All right, so you got about 15 minutes. All right, so let's start working on it. 1 to 32. 1 to 30. And again, I don't normally give you 30 problems or more, but this one, you should be able to do it pretty quick and easy. All right, shouldn't be that hard. Okay.